that's difficult for the victim, isn't it?
I'll believe anything you say.
It's not what I say, it's what the court document says.
I haven't read
It's not what I said, it's a court
document. I don't know, it's 20 years ago. And this is why, you know, mainstream media like you are losing the affections of the British public. Let's worry about where we are today. Let's worry about where the country's going. Let's worry about the fact we're getting poorer. Let's worry about the fact that our communities are breaking down, that people are scared to walk on the streets of London wearing a watch or jewellery.
No,
I know.
What
and
I'm
you're
asking
talking, you're talking about an inside Westminster story that you want to talk about.
Emily Maitlis, James O'Brien, Beth Rigby, please block your ears. Block your ears right now. I've got news you're not going to like. Nigel Farage will be the next British Prime Minister. That's actually me predicting it back in June, the moment Nigel announced he was running to become an MP in Clacton. And finally, everyone else is catching up, with the bookies Ladbrokes, they're one of the biggies, making Reform 9-4 to win the most seats overnight. And Farage is now the odds-on favourite to succeed Starmer as the next British Prime Minister. There's the full list, though. Kemi Badenoch 3-1, Angela Rayner 6-1, Wes Streeting 10-1, Boris Johnson 14-1, Yvette Cooper 16-1. As Darren Grimes rightly pointed out, no wonder the attacks on Reform are 10 times more desperate, and they really are. Let's take Beth. You know Beth from Sly News? Sly News, a broadcaster that has become deranged in quite an obsessive manner, actually, about a spent conviction by the Reform UK MP James McMurdoch about a contested act of teenage violence against his then-girlfriend that took place 20 years ago. Now, a despicable act, of course. No one is disputing that. Certainly not James McMurdoch, but one he has fully repented for and turned his life around. But Sly, they cover this story far more than, for example, the current Prime Minister lying to the public about hiring a convicted fraudster to his first cabinet without telling the public. Or how about the current Prime Minister having a Chancellor who completely faked her CV? What I like, though, is that Nigel is starting to realise the MSM are not to be cooperated with. Watch his takedown of Sly when Beth pushed him too far.
Very well.
But for the victim, for him to imply that she was pushed over when the court document says he kicked her, that's difficult for the victim, isn't it?
I'll believe anything you say.
It's not what I say, it's what the court document says.
I haven't read
it's not what I said, it's a court
document. I don't know, it's 20 years ago. And this is why, you know, mainstream media like you are losing the affections of the British public. Let's worry about where we are today. Let's worry about where the country's going. Let's worry about the fact we're getting poorer. Let's worry about the fact that our communities are breaking down, that people are scared to walk on the streets of London wearing a watch or jewellery. I know. You're talking about an inside Westminster story that you want to talk about.
If you want to professionalise the party, then these are questions people are going to ask. And if it was another political party and this has happened, you would expect me to ask them as well.
I have not heard you ask a single Labour minister about the case where a man was on the ground in Runcorn.
The sooner Nigel realises that the MSM is finished and it's the independent media that will accurately report on Reform's message, the better. And trust me, we're in a battle for the soul of Britain and the future of Western civilization. The MSM just don't understand that. Take the news today that the so-called Gaza Five, who use the Independent Alliance banner at the moment, or as I call them, the pro-Hamas mob currently led by Jeremy Corbyn, well, they are intending to form a formal political party in the new year. Now, one of the members is Iqbal Muhammad, the MP for Dewsbury and Batley, who yesterday argued against outlawing first cousin marriage.
The way to redress this is not to empower the state to ban adults from marrying each other, not least because I don't think it would be effective or enforceable. Instead, the matter needs to be approached as a health awareness issue and a cultural issue where women are being forced against their will to undergo marriage. In doing so, it is important to recognise for many people this is a highly sensitive issue and in discussing it, we should try to step into the shoes of those who perhaps are not from the same culture as ours, to better understand why the practice continues to be so widespread. An estimated 35 to 50% of all sub-Saharan African populations either prefer or accept cousin marriages, and it is extremely common in the Middle East and in South Asia. The reason the practice is so common is that ordinary people see family intermarriage overall as something that is very positive, something that helps build family bonds and helps put families on a more secure financial foothold. However, as is well documented, it is not without health risks for the children of those relationships, some of whom will be born out of wedlock. Instead of stigmatizing those who are in cousin marriages or those inclined to be, a much more positive approach would be to facilitate advanced genetic test screening for prospective married couples, as is the case in all Arab countries in the Persian Gulf.
Yes, Arab countries in the Persian Gulf, not in the United Kingdom. But Labour isn't much better given they are so worried about Corbyn's new alliance stealing their seats at the next election. Robert Jenrick posted on X, "I urged Labour to support the bill to ban first cousin marriage. Shamefully, they declined." And here's the proof of him doing exactly that.
Cousin marriage has absolutely no place in Britain. The medical evidence is overwhelming. It significantly increases the risk of birth defects. And the moral case is clear. We see hundreds of exploitative marriages which ruin lives. Frankly, it should have been stamped out a long time ago. Will the Justice Secretary commit to ending this medieval practice which is rearing its head once again in modern Britain?
He'll know that there has been a recent Law Commission report on marriage law more generally, and the government is going to consult on broader reform to marriage law, and we will certainly consider the issues that he's raised before setting out a public position.
Not good enough, I'm afraid. Not good enough. And the culture war we are facing in the UK is very, very real. Just ask Floyd Mayweather, the legendary American boxer who is pro-Israel. He had to be shepherded away by his security team when confronted quite violently while visiting London this week, just to shop, not to make a political point, just to shop, but look at the scenes he faced.
Money, man. Money, man, don't worry, you're good, man. They're trying to get me in there. What?
So look, this is the battle of our lives. And there is good reason to believe that the UK's two-party system might finally be about to be smashed. In all honesty, it is long overdue. But now, let me bring in my superstar panel. Absolutely delighted to have with me today Reverend Canon Father Phil Harris and the head of the brilliant Together Declaration, Alan Miller, who has hot-footed it from those incredible scenes at Westminster. And don't worry, we're going to be talking in depth about the incredible tractor convoy in Westminster later. But Alan, really connected to this, of course, is the surge of Nigel Farage. You spoke to him at the rally this morning. What do you make of the fact that he is now bookies' favourite to be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom?
Well, I think it's completely understandable, to be honest, that Nigel Farage is the bookie's favourite. If you think about what's happened in the last few months, we've got a government that said that they would not do all sorts of things, and then they've gone on to do the exact opposite. They've attacked pensioners, students and farmers, much loved farmers, drivers and citizens. And I think that the public is absolutely hungry and thirsty for honest discussion. They're fed up with some of the scenes that they've seen throughout the last year in particular across our streets. They don't accept the idea of two-tier policing, our judiciary being weaponized. They want to be able to speak freely and not run the risk of, being imprisoned for speculating on social media, or even for shouting at a protest or saying things that they think about, which are entirely reasonable to say in a democratic society, whilst other people say all sorts of things that challenge our very way of life and secular and democratic society. And it seems that if you challenge that at all, you're called all sorts of names like racist and other things. The public's fed up of it. They're fed up with the fact that you can't get a police officer to come if you have your house burgled, but criticize the idea that you can call a man. 6 police officers may come to your house or to your workplace. All of this stuff has gone far too far. And net zero being at the heart of the kind of zealotry that's impoverishing us and making Britain poorer. I think on a whole host of these things, the public's had enough. We've seen it in America, Dan. We've seen it with this new coalition of a kind of broad, popular set of people in a range of areas that has really transformed how we understand politics. A very exciting new dynamic. We need wealth creation in Britain. We need innovation. We need an inspiring view of the future, but we need to have control of things, of our public sector. The private sector needs to flourish. We need to be able to control our borders. The civil service can't keep usurping and stopping democratically elected representatives from doing what they want to do. All of this needs to end. The public has had enough of this. We've been saying this for a while together, getting the public's voices heard, but I think that's why we're going to see increasingly more people go with much of what Reform's saying and supporting Nigel, it looks like.
It really does look like that. It really does look like that. Father Phil, what do you make of the surging Reform UK?
Well, firstly, it's not surprising, is it?
No.
It really is not surprising. We are in a fractured society, and I put a tweet out, an X out a few days ago, that actually said that this is probably the last, or this will be the last Labour government, and we've probably seen the last Conservative government. Because
in history, ever? You think they're done?
I think they're done. I can't see. There's a tipping point, isn't there? And it's like the Titanic. When that final chamber fills with water, the boat is going down and there's no way of bringing it back. And I think that we've reached that tipping point, that there's no substance in Labour is no longer Labour and for the working classes, and the Conservative Party is no longer Conservative. And because, the foundations of what those parties were set up for has eroded away, they're no longer those valid parties that they were before. And so what it's created is a vacuum. And whether you agreed with Brexit or whether you didn't agree with Brexit, when you have the liberal Westminster elite frustrating the will of the people, at some point in the near future or the not too distant future that there is going to be a train smash. And we are on the cusp of that train smash right now. And, I was at Parliament Square a few weeks ago and spoke at Parliament Square, for the Unite Britain. And you could see really where people were at. I went and spent time, as I typically do, in the crowds and just listening to people. And that frustration, because as I say, the Conservatives are no longer Conservatives. The Labour Party are no longer Labour Party. And our democracy only works when there is a good opposition. And we've had a uniparty. And so we have.
And we've been lied to by both of them for decades. And the thing is, Alan Miller, it's actually a really good point for Father Phil to raise the issue of Brexit and democracy, right? Because we know that the establishment are prepared to overturn democracy. They wanted to subvert the biggest democratic vote in British history. Look at what's going on in Romania, for example. The establishment in that country doesn't like the result of the presidential election, so they say it's null and void. And I really feel like I'm scared of the lengths the establishment are going to go to here to stop the uni party being overturned.
Well, we should, it's definitely a big concern. It should be noted that one of the reasons the Conservatives are so punished is because they were given a very strict instruction and that was to implement Brexit. Now, formally speaking, we did do that. We got the Brexit vote passed, but all of the measures kept not being implemented in the way they could. We've kind of squandered much of that spirit and the sense of what Brexit, the instruction was. There's still not a leaving of the ECHR, and using constant bureaucratic reasons for not being able to implement things. The public are furious. They gave an instruction. Meanwhile, we see Keir trying to rekindle and attribute more kind of European and globalist institutions. He is Davos man. He says he's more comfortable in Davos than in the cut and thrust of Westminster.
He said it.
He said it, Davos over Westminster, that pesky business of the democratic cut and thrust, the debate and discussion, right?
Yeah,
being accountable. And this is a real concern. And I think the thing is that whilst that impulse is always there to go to the great and the good, the few institutions, the globalist organizations, I think now we've got a situation, and we're seeing it with the farmers, but equally, Dan, and we'll talk about it with some of these other independent parties, and I may not like their politics, but the fracturing of the old parties, the collapse and the disintegration of Labour, and what's happened to the Tories is going to mean a whole new set of things come out and come through. And it isn't just going to be the things that perhaps you or I might like. There'll be other things, but we need to be able to thrash these issues out openly, not being censored and shut down. And we need to be able to win over, I think we've got the majority of the public as it happens, right? But we need to be able to do that. And certainly we need to make sure that the idea that we're going to become more aligned to something we should have left and more kind of tied down with those things is not allowed to happen. That's really essential.
Okay, well, let's talk then, Father Phil, about some of the things that we might not like in this new system. And I'd say probably one of the things that we agree on, obviously we believe in democracy, but it's pretty terrifying seeing sectarian politics coming to the UK with what is going to be the establishment of this pro-Hamas grouping in Parliament. Yep. 5 MPs they have, and they are potentially going to take more seats away from Labour at the next election. So one of their MPs, Iqbal Mohammed, yesterday argues against first cousin marriage becoming illegal in the UK, and specifically argues in the British Parliament in Westminster that we need to be looking to Arab states in the Persian Gulf when we're making laws about issues like first cousin marriage. Now, look, absolutely, I believe in his right to free speech, and he is democratically elected, but it's terrifying, is it not?
Well, those words that you just spoke, and I will paraphrase them, when we look to the Arab states, that sets the agenda, does it not, Dan?
Of course.
That's the bit that is underlying, and we are at a very dangerous tipping point. And I think we talked about reform a few moments ago, and Nigel went on kind of a broadcast and said, by 2050, this will be the Muslim population in the UK. I don't know whether that was a wise comment by Nigel. The reality is that...
So you don't think Nigel's tough enough on Islam?
Correct, without any shadow of doubt. And I think that, one of the bits for me personally is we have not seen the threat of radical Islam. And let me just be very clear, I have no problem with some wonderful people who are friends of mine who are Muslim. I have a problem with radical Islam, and I have a problem with the idea of Sharia law being implemented in some shape or form in this country. And I have a problem with the term Islamophobia, but the whole point of the MP highlighting this, what he's saying is actually Sharia law says this, and therefore we should not outlaw it.
Yeah, Alan Miller, how do we deal with that?
Well, I think the thing is that this is partly to do with the collapse of our own belief in our own values. The Enlightenment saw universal principles, free speech, but the secular separation between the state and religion, the idea of individual conscience, that was what the whole Reformation was about. If we think about the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, all things spread from there. The ability for us to make decisions in private, the private and the public sphere. And the idea that we have anything like blasphemy laws, or that we somehow should adopt or allow things like religious laws to dictate what happens in our towns and cities is actually absolutely anathema. And it's representative of a decadent political class that is not able to champion and celebrate what's so important, what our forefathers fought and died for, what people like William Tyndale actually was burnt at the cross for, which people put their lives on the stake for. And the fact is that we've seen a lot of this since the days of Salman Rushdie saying, I'm offended, and people have curtailed to it. But now we've got a moment where it's not, we saw it in the elections. We saw a Green MP then calling out Allahu Akbar, right? What has that got to do with Green politics in particular? And we've seen a situation, but I'm quite pleased in some ways, Dan. I think it's really good that they're actually saying who they are, that Jeremy Corbyn in the so-called independents are saying this is where we stand, so we can have an honest conversation, right? We
yes.
can have an honest conversation.
Well, that is much better, is it not, Alan, than the Labour position, which is just appeasement, just opening the door a little bit to the idea of a blasphemy law, for example, not being prepared to talk about what's actually going on in our mosques. So you actually say it's better. Daylight is the best disinfectant. At least we know the extremist views of these sectarian political parties, and then we can fight it democratically.
And frankly, I want to be out there discussing and debating it. We were up in Rotherham and Rochdale, right? And we went up there during the elections and we were talking to people. And it's not a done deal by any means, right? There are millions of Muslims in this country, and many of them do not subscribe to the idea that you should have a Sharia law imposed on society. It's not just that there are violent radical Islamists. Islamism, even when it's not violent, attempts to suffocate secular democratic society and impose its own views without violence, right? It will use the democratic method to do it in different places. However, people that are following our customs and our laws and our traditions and in our society who are Muslim do not want to do that. So it's important to make a distinction, but it's also essential to say that there are people that will use what we have to try and limit and suffocate things, and they'll attack all sorts of things like the idea of being able to be gay, or the role of women in society, or the role of free speech, or a range of other things. And I think when, it's not just, these independents, but you see it also, George Galloway and others have said some of these things in different contexts about Gaza, and it's fine, people can have a view about Gaza, but it's also about Britain. And what ends up happening is we have a discussion. Do we want to have a Sunni-inspired jihadi approach, like the Muslim Brotherhood have had, or like we've had what we've seen in other nation states that have been backed, and we've got like Qatar and others, or that's just taken over from Bashar Assad. Okay, Bashar Assad, terrible dictator and tyrant, absolutely, right? But now we've got a situation where Sunni jihadis that were tied to ISIS and Al-Qaeda before have come in. We've got a whole kind of serious situation that's going on there. We've seen what that's meant in a range of other areas, and they're the same factions that are fighting in other places. Now, if you look at what's happened and you look at some of the inspiration, I find it difficult that someone like Jeremy Corbyn on the one hand says that he believes in democracy and freedom, and yet if you believe in democracy or freedom in Gaza, or you're a nationalist, or you really want national independence for Palestinians, you were killed or imprisoned by Hamas. I find it difficult, and I want to discuss these things openly, right? It's all, people use these things, you're being racist, or don't you care about children dying? Well, absolutely we do, right? The thing is, people want peace. I agree, we want peace. Give the hostages back might be a first start for having peace, right? And then you could have a big conversation about history.
But also the conversation has to extend to what is going on in mosques in the United Kingdom. And that's the conversation that Labour will not have, because they're too scared. And you're right. When it comes to Gaza and Israel, Labour doesn't even really want to have that conversation, Alan, because they're just so scared they try and take an almost neutral position, which is impossible in a conflict like this. But sorry, Alan.
I just will say as well about that we've seen all of this since 9/11 onwards, and we've seen a situation, but we have got to have the confidence in our beliefs and our values, and we've got to uphold them. No more two-tier policing, no more being embarrassed to implement measures because someone might say you're being racist or offensive.
Correct.
It's one rule. It should be policing without fear or favour, universal, same ascribed situation for our laws, hold it with authority. In our schools, we can't allow the imposition of ideology onto the things. We have to assert we're a secular society with democratic principles, and we respect private faith of people. It was actually Church of England country. It was meant to be. I don't know what happened to all of that, right? And so you've got a situation where we need to uphold those values because the decadent elite, the technocrats, they don't believe in it anymore. And worse than that, they're embarrassed about it. And I think that we need to resuscitate that debate and discussion about what's so important, that we are the custodians of those things, that it doesn't happen. In a lot of these nations that we're seeing in the countries we're being told to be more like by some of these people, if we have these kind of conversations, you get a knock on the door, you get imprisoned.
Yes, absolutely. And then we have the issue with the mainstream media, which I raised in my digest. And I wanted to show you this little clip from a guy called Bruce's Randomness, who was responding to James O'Brien automatically saying that the folk like me who have an issue with Sadiq Khan becoming Sir Sadiq Khan, given he has literally destroyed the greatest city in the world, well, we are racist. Watch this. First, though, digestive issues are caused by a potential toxin that's in all of the, quote, healthy foods that scientists have been telling us to eat with a fraudulent food pyramid for the longest time. And this potential toxin causes digestive issues. According to Dr. Gundry, a world-renowned cardiologist, this is affecting millions of people nationwide. Warning signs include weight gain, fatigue, and digestive discomfort, and stiff joints, even skin problems. Well, Dr. Gundry explains these side effects are often mistaken for normal signs of aging because digestive issues develop usually over a matter of years and sometimes even decades. I can assure you that the damage is caused by these health foods, and it's far from normal. The good news is you can easily help fix the problem from your own home. It's very simple. You just have to know which foods are actually healthy and which contain this hidden potential toxin. So you can go find this yourself at gutcleanseprotocol.com/outspoken. So that's gutcleanseprotocol.com/outspoken. To make it easier for you, I've put the link in our show notes just below this video on YouTube, or if you're watching on Rumble too. Because after years of research, Dr. Gundry has decided to release an informative video to the public, free and uninterrupted, showcasing exactly which foods you need to avoid. Go find that video at gutcleanseprotocol.com/outspoken, or just click on the link in the description box below. But now, back to the show.
Right-wing media going so bonkers.
The right-wing media. This coming from the formerly known London Broadcasting Company, now known as the left-wing broadcasting crap organisation that he works for, but let's let him continue.
I understand why some corners of it are so cross about a three-time elected London mayor being nominated for a knighthood. It's because he's brown.
Oh, it's because he's brown. Right, okay, James, because you're the only person who's actually said that. It has nothing to do with the colour of his skin. I think it has everything to do with the fact that knife crime is up in...
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Totally, that is what it's about, Father Phil. But how on earth can we ever have debates about what's really going on, about the destruction of our society, if we have fools like that immediately running to say, oh, it's because he's brown, when they never say, oh, the reason that someone's attacking Kemi Badenoch is because she's black?
Yeah.
So Alan is correct about light being the disinfectant and bring things into the light. The problem that we've got is we have people trying not to bring things into the light, and when you have conversations that are meaningful, they shut them down with typical tropes of bigotry, racism, etc. But you have a mainstream media who is determined not to bring them into the light and not to have the conversations that Alan is actually referring to. And so it's this kind of, it's the strangling and suppression that we were speaking a few moments about. But there is this whole agenda that is gradually breaking apart. You can see the seams coming apart right now, but we've got, and the majority of the people, Alan's right, I don't think that it's the majority of people. I know it's the majority of people. And certainly in my world from the Christian church, and Alan raised a point about, the Church of England. This is still a Christian country. The monarch is the supreme governor of the Church of England. The problem is we've abdicated. We've abdicated for all those things that are right. And I am fed up of having to apologise for the state of the church because we haven't stood for the people. We haven't stood alongside the people and with the people and held people to account. And I think that, there's a verse in Isaiah that says, woe to them that call evil good and good evil, and put darkness for light and light for darkness, and put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. And what we have is people doing that in mainstream media. We have politicians doing that. We have it everywhere. We are up is down, down is up, sky is green, grass is blue. And people are, certain people are falling for it. Meanwhile, the common sense people who have been centrist, and they might even be centrist slightly left or centrist slightly right, are now disillusioned because we are seeing what's happening before us. But we've got to somehow bring it into the light. And it's where, togetherness, just kind of, quoting Alan's movement of bringing people together so that we can stand together and let the political elites know. And it's very interesting. I know we're going to, we've touched on farming.
Yes, and we'll come to that shortly.
And there's a whole agenda there, but you have politicians now who are caught out because they have constituents who are going to be affected by this nonsense. But we have to get all this conversation into the light. We need to be brave around it. We need to talk about it. We need to talk honestly about it.
We do, and thank goodness you two are doing that. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.